Welcome everyone to Wine 101 here July of 2020. Hope you're all doing well so far this crazy year. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the anatomy of a barrel. So whenever I do a wine tour, and probably maybe 90% of the time, maybe more, inevitably they'll ask, so do you use French or American oak? So the answer is always yes. So we here at Jolo use a combination of French and American oak. And behind me here is a new addition. We just got it delivered today. Bonjour, bonjour. We're still teaching him English. He just got here from France. So that is French oak. Bonjour, bonjour. So he's getting acclimated. So literally this has been in this building for 3 hours. So French and American, we use a combination, and there is a very distinct difference between both. And you'll find two schools of thought. It's really a religion in some cases for some people, where without question their trait, let's say silver oak, which is a very well-known winery in Napa, they use exclusively American oak. In fact, they ended up buying a cooperage because they use so much American oak. So that's what their religion is, and that's what they want to promote in their wines. And we'll talk about some of the nuances. And then of course, Bordeaux uses French oak. So not just because it's in France, so a lot of Spanish wineries use American oak, even though they're in Europe. So they're importing it when they could just take a train ride down basically and grab some French oak. So there's some distinct differences and reasons people use certain types of wood, oak, and from different regions. And here at Jolo, we blend. So it's a amalgamation, if you will. So to me, first of all, I want you to taste the wine. So we've talked about this before. To me, there's nothing more romantic on the planet than a bottle of wine. The heritage, the history, the provenance, the soil it grows in, the climate, the year, the vintage, all of that is captured in a glass of wine. And basically every bottle of wine is a time capsule, which you can't say for any other beverage. I don't know any other beverage that has a vintage date, the date it was made, the year it was made. Most things have an expiration date. Wine doesn't. Wine gets better with age. Don't get me started, it's a whole other segment. So with the wine, my goal is to use the wood as a salt and pepper, basically, as a finishing spice. I want you to taste the protein on a dish, let's say, in culinary terms. I want you to taste the Kobe beef. I don't want to take my Kobe beef and put a rich, creamy sauce on it. That would do neither the sauce or the Kobe beef any good. So I want you to taste each element on its own. So for me, and the way to describe it to guests and wine club members is when you go to the Louvre to see the Mona Lisa, nobody ever remarks, I've never seen one TripAdvisor review or Yelp review on, did you see that frame? It was unbelievable. It's about the painting. So to me, the wine is about the grapes, it's about the soil, it's about the harvest, it's about the actual product inside the bottle, which is wine, which is from grapes, which is an agricultural product. The barrel should be in the background. It shouldn't be the primary nuance or the primary descriptor of the wine. Where I find a lot of American wines have that very pronounced aspect of oak. And you can get that using French oak too, by the way. So we'll talk about the differences, and then I'll get back into some of the nuances. So the primary difference between French oak and American oak is one is made in France and one's made in America. I'm kidding. So the French oak, because of where most of it comes from, which is the Limousin area, which is in south-central France. So if you know where Bordeaux is, it's northeast about 100 kilometers, which is the forest. And that's where all of the French oak comes from, is in and around that region. There's 4 other subforests that most of it's harvested from, but Limousin is the most famous and we're most coveted, arguably. And so there, and by the way, to be this stave, which is what that is, it's a stave, to be that stave, the tree has to be at least 100 years old. So before they start making a barrel, a tree has already lived a 100-year lifespan. So right off the bat, we're talking romance, right? So that's how old the barrel has to be and live through civil wars and World War IIs and World War Is before you can even start making wine with it. It's crazy when you think about it in those terms. So in that area of France, it's not as hot or cold, it's more temperate. So every year, as you know, a growth ring is formed in a tree, and the slower they grow, the smaller the rings are. And that's one of the reasons the tree has to be 100 years old, so it's really thick. and can be a really well-made product to be weather tight or waterproof or watertight. So those rings are formed. So if the tree is growing quicker, it's getting more water, more sunshine, it's warmer in that climate, the rings are going to grow faster. So the tree grows thicker quicker, which means you're going to have wider rings. So in that part of the region of France, they typically grow slower. So the rings are tighter. So you'll find with French oak, just visually, you'll see the grain is a lot tighter. The grain is very narrow. The rays, which are those big bursts that look like EKG chart ups and downs, those are the rays, and even those tend to be a little tighter and not as pronounced. On American oak, if you have an American oak floor at home, you'll see those huge rays. They're big. They're like 6 inches and then a big drop off. It's like you're having a heart attack if that was an EKG. So you'll see the grain of the wood is thicker. You can see the grains visually. You have to get up really, really close to a French oak barrel to see the grain. That's how tight and that's how slow those rings grow. So because of that, you get less oxygenation with the wine. So just by virtue of aging in a French oak barrel, it's going to age a lot longer, or be required to be aged longer, to get the same oxygenation, the same slow introduction of air to help basically refine the wine, to calm it down, to give it those elegant nuances, the elegant mouthfeel. Because in the production in the barrel, you're getting a lot of exchange of things. So in the barrel itself, you're getting vanillins and you're getting tannins. So you don't want to get too much tannin from a barrel. So you can get a lot of tannins from a barrel if they don't age the barrel properly before they sell you the barrel. So whether it's French or American, we'll talk about the American nuances in a moment, but in those French nuances, we'll talk about the tighter grain and the growing climate there. But the barrel itself, they take the staves out of the 100-year-old trees and they'll age them outside for 2 years, 3 years, and in some cases 4 years. I get a lot of 4-year-old barrels. So you've aged wood at home, what's called seasoned wood for your fireplace. They season this outside in the elements, the sun, the air, the wind, the water, the snow, whatever happens. They season it outside. And what happens is a lot of those harsh tannins and some of the resin and all that gets leached out and the wood gets refined by itself. So the longer the seasoning of the barrel, it's like aged beef is more expensive than non-aged beef. So the longer they're aging the barrels, the more nuanced the tone will be and less in your face the impartation of the flavors of the barrel will be. So we typically Ajolo buy 3- and 4-year-old aged barrels. So they've never been used before, they're brand new, but they've aged the barrel staves, the wood, the heads, they make the heads out of, for 3 to 4 years. And then they'll assemble it and toast the insides, which we'll talk about here in a quick moment as well, and then ship them, and then we fill it full of wine. So both processes are the same, American or French. So the French being tighter, spends more time in the barrel usually because you need more oxygenation, so it takes longer because there's less airflow and interaction with the air and the outside elements. So they've all talked about the angel share in the business. So a lot of you wine fans know the angel share means that just by pure wicking and evaporation from the wood and the oak, what happens is you'll lose about 10% of the contents of the barrel every 12 months just by evaporation. Especially in American oak, since it's more porous and the grain is wider, you get more air introduction or oxygenation in the aging process. So you'll actually lose more wine. So you have more topping off to do, or maintenance of the barrels and the interior of the barrels. So primary differences. Think of Bordeaux, think of Burgundy, think of a Frenchman, very refined, very elegant, very European. They wear the tight little skinny jeans, they're very tight jackets, everything's very elegant and refined. You think the United States, you think big overalls, big jeans, loose, comfy fits, big and brawny guys are working out all the time and they're eating double cheeseburgers and playing American football and all that good stuff. So French oak is more elegant. So think of what girls are made of. They're made of sugar and spice and everything nice. And that's basically what you get with a French oak barrel, spices. So that's what they're known for. And all barrels have, they'll add a little sugar component to the wine, sugary on the palate, not cane sugar, but there's other types of sugars, and that is added. You'll get some mouthfeel enhancements. So you get some body, some weight in French oak and American oak. But with the French oak, you'll get much more. With the French oak, you'll get much more of the spicy qualities. You've heard things described as peppery, nutmeg, clove. You're getting French oak now introduction. If you smell, you get a lot of leather, maybe some tobacco leaf. Now you're thinking French. So when you hear somebody says, wow, it's tons of vanilla, that's American oak. So you get very little impartation of vanilla from a French oak. You'll get a lot from American oak. For American oak, you'll get a lot of coconut. You'll get a lot of dill. Like our Pilot Fog, I age exclusively in American oak barrels, brand new American oak barrels every year. Right off the bat, when I smell it and I take my first air over the palate of my first sip, it's like an almond joy bar between the chocolate and the coconut. So you get a lot of cocoa as well in American oak barrels. You get a little bit in French, but not so much in American. So think American is more of a male, right? So it's boys are made of snips and snails and puppy dog tails. So that's kind of what American wine is. It's big and brawny and bold and hits you in the face. And you can tell right off the bat, wow, oh, vanilla, sweet oak, and I get coconut and maybe a little dill once in a while. So that's American oak. Wider grain, more coconut and less spice, dill, lots of vanilla. And that's why a lot of winemakers with white wines, especially Chardonnays, and why Chardonnays are so expensive, that are barrel aged, they typically use French oak for barrel aging because you don't want a ton of vanilla in there. You want some of that spicy elegance, and you don't want like vanilla and coconut really in your Chardonnay, typically. So you can use white, there's nothing wrong with that. So here at Jolo, we departed from the Pilot Fog, as I mentioned earlier, where we use exclusively American oak. This last vintage, 2019, we aged it in brand new French oak. That barrel there, which was brand new French oak last year, so half of it was in that barrel and the other half was in brand new American oak barrel. So we blended the two together for 19. So here at Jolo, I use a peppering, if you will, of different barrel types. So I'll age them exclusively. Let's say Petit Verdot. I might age Petit Verdot 50% in American oak and 50% in French oak and decide later which one goes where. So when I make a blend, maybe the blend that I end up making ended up being from all French barrels. When I add the Merlot or the Cab Franc or the Cab Sauv with the Petit Verdot, and let's say the Carolus, for example, it might have ended up being all French oak versus American. So it gives you that luxury when you're a winemaker to do the sampling later to figure out what nuances played best in that vintage with that wine, and then how you make the blends. So in blending single varietals as well. So you can take the French and the American, which we do for Crimson Creek. Our Chambourcin grape gets French and American treatment, and they get blended every single year as that single varietal. So, so we talked about the regions and some of the impartations. And when somebody asks you, what's your favorite barrel? Do you prefer French or American? Hopefully you now can tell them which you prefer and why you prefer it. So hopefully this was a great segment for you all. And we love you at Jolo Winery. Hope you're all being safe. We can't wait to see you in person. Cheers.